Hi everyone, hope you're having a good half term. This week's video is on the internal factors, social class and attainment. What we're going to look at are what are the internal factors, what effect does it have on educational achievement, why do they actually occur in the first place, and what kind of theory we can apply to these. There's your keywords for your glossary this week. Make sure you know what they are. I'm sure you already know by now. You're probably going to get tested on those in class when we get back. Okay, so as we've already said previously, middle class institutions, schools, mainly because most teachers are from middle class backgrounds, or if they weren't, they've successfully negotiated education to become middle class themselves. So they might have been working class growing up, but because of education and achieving and things like that, they have basically made themselves middle class. Now the problem with that is that we've got middle class institutions, but not everyone that goes to them are middle class. So as we've experienced previously with the external factors, there's an issue there for working class children in terms of language and intellectual development and stuff like that. Okay, interactionalists are a set of sociologists who very much look at the effect that pupils have by teachers, schools, and stuff like that, and they look at it. Four things, three of them we're going to really look at this week. Course choice we'll look at in a little bit more depth a little bit later on in the course, but those are labelling, self-fulfilling prophecy, which you've come across before, and setting and streaming. So the labelling thing has kind of come around because of this guy here, Howard Becker, and it's basically, if you label something, you attach a meaning or a definition to them. And in terms of school, the teachers attach a label to a child, so it might be the troublemaker, the hard worker, the thick, all that kind of thing. Howard Becker carried out lots of studies in the late 1960s and through to the 1970s. And one study he carried out in Chicago is basically found that teachers labelled children against their ideals. Remember we were talking about habitus last week. Well, teachers have this middle class habitus and these norms and values that children should be meeting and are measured against. And basically, they judge pupils on how closely they actually came to this ideal pupil. So the work that Becker carried out found that it was the classroom work and also work outside the classroom, I suppose. Your conduct and your appearance were the major influencing factors. Appearance is quite an initial thing, so you see someone straight away in hoodie, baggy jeans or whatever, and you think, oh, there's a troublemaker, he's not going to amount to much or anything like that. Someone who was dressed smart might have a different label attached to them. Your conduct in class, so wanting to sit at the front or answer questions. And then work as well, so the amount of work you put in, how well it was done, and if it was done on time and things like that. What Becker found was that teachers saw that middle class children, people from middle class backgrounds, were the closest to the ideal of having good work ethic, good conduct and good appearance, and those working class were furthest away. So in terms of labelling, there's been quite a few theorists put some information out there, and it's not just teachers who would label children negatively. So we've got educational counsellors, so that's like careers advice, and they would give advice very much based on class and race. So the jobs that children were being told that they could achieve was very much based on their class and race. So children from lower working class backgrounds, and maybe who were black as well, were told that they could go for manual jobs or unskilled or very very low skilled jobs, where children from working class white backgrounds were told that they could become doctors and lawyers and solicitors and stuff like that. RISC believes that there's labelling in all the way down into primary school. A study that RISC carried out found that a teacher placed children in groups based on their background and appearance. Those who didn't really hit the norms of those teachers, so maybe they didn't look well dressed, the appearance wasn't very good, and the background that they were from wasn't great, they were put at the back of the class and they were given the least encouragement and stuff like that. And Kerry also says that it's not just the pupils themselves that are labelled, but it's the level of knowledge. So, all students are supposed to follow the same course content and curriculum, but that's not to say teachers were teaching the people at the higher sets the same as the one they were teaching them in the lower sets. So the study carried out by Kerry found that teachers taught Group A more theory and more abstract to a higher level, and Group C, which was the lower group, were given much more like low-level descriptions and common sense and stuff like that. So Kerry believes that there is definitely a class difference, and also this means that there will be a continuing class difference, because those who are of the higher class, who are in the higher groups, are being taught to a higher level, so they are going to achieve to a higher level and get better exam results. That leads us on to the self-fulfilling prophecy. If we're placed in these really low groups, or we're put at the back of classrooms and we're given little help, or we're seen as troublemakers, and we're going to start thinking, well, actually, maybe I am. Well, basically, self-fulfilling prophecy is a prediction that does come true because it's been made. So if someone said, oh, you're going to fail, then you just, think, well, I am going to fail. And when you fail, this self-fulfilling prophecy comes true. Okay, Rosenthal and Jacobson carried out quite a few studies, but one particular one that they carried out was on primary schools, where they went into primary school and said that they had devised this brand new test which allowed them to identify which students were going to be really clever in later life. And basically this test was just like an IQ test, really. But it appears that the teachers believed them. The researchers randomly picked out 20% of the pupils, any 20%, and told them that, these were identified through this test as being these spurters, people who were going to really suddenly develop really good intellect and do really well in their exams. A year later they went back to school and found that nearly half of the students who were identified, half of those 20%, had indeed made significant progress. Now this wasn't because of any special test or anything like that, but it was mainly due to the fact that these teachers thought, these are the ones who are going to be extremely intelligent. And they spent more time with them. Basically, they found that the teachers put a positive label and actually helped them. So by telling the teachers that these people were going to achieve, they actually helped them achieve that self-fulfilling prophecy. Teachers treat these students differently in their body language, the amount of attention, the amount of help they give them with work, the encouragement that they give them. So Rosenthal and Jacobson basically found that self-fulfilling prophecy is about this idea that you're told something's going to happen, either you as an individual or the teacher, and then you do something about it, you bring on that thing happening. Okay then, setting and streaming is where you put children into different ability groups. So where you would have done your SATs in year 6, year 7, which put you into certain groups when you went into secondary school. When I was at school, it was alpha, beta, and gamma. So alpha being at the top, gamma at the bottom, but you might have been in top set, middle set, bottom set, or whatever. Although it's not supposed to happen, as we've already realised with the work of Keddy, each ability group is kind of taught separately. And if you think about GCSEs, you would have went in foundation paper or a higher paper as well, and you're taught towards that, and you were taught at a higher level to pass the higher paper. Douglas also found that in an earlier age as well, these children who were put into low streams, at the age of 8, they had quite a decent IQ. By the time they got 11, their IQ had actually slipped, and it was the alternative results for middle class whose IQs are actually improving. So this links in again to self-fulfilling prophecy with labelling and things like that, where self-fulfilling prophecy, negative self-fulfilling prophecies are more likely to happen when children are streamed into lower groups, and positive self-fulfilling prophecy for children who are in the higher groups. Now, Becker argues one of the problems that we have is that teachers don't see children as the ideal pupils if they're from working class backgrounds, and this could be based on the habitist idea that we talked about last week, where we have these norms and values that we hold and we measure children against, and if we don't meet them, then we obviously have lower expectations. As a result of this, working class children are more likely to fall into lower streams, And once this has happened, it's actually difficult to move up into the higher streams. Now, there's always exceptions to this, but one of the reasons why it's so difficult is that because children have this label attached to them, it's very hard to shake it from the teacher's viewpoint. So a teacher will label a child as lazy or not hardworking or thick or whatever. It's very difficult at school to shake off this label, so there's going to be low expectations and less help given to you. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult as a working class child, placed in a lower stream, to move up. Consequences of this, obviously, is that the self-fulfilling prophecy is created and then lived up to, especially for underachieving or lower end students. One thing we need to look at, though, is like what happens as a result of this self-fulfilling prophecy or negative streaming. Lacey believes that students fall into different subcultures. And basically, subcultures, as we know, are groups of people who share similar values or behaviours or beliefs. And Colin Lacey believes that there's two different types, and that we differentiate, and there's polarisation. So differentiation is where kind of teachers do this based on their perceptions, and they differentiate between different students. So they believe students are either able or less able. But the pupil response is this polarisation, where we either go pro-school or anti-school. So the pro-school is very much seen as a middle-class thing, where middle-class students are more likely to kind of commit to the school values and to abide by rules and things like that. Where the anti-school subculture is mainly for those who have been negatively labelled and have these negative self-fulfilling prophecies placed upon them. Lacey found that a lot of these students were working class students and they had low self-esteem, particularly boys. They have problems gaining status, and they need to gain status from other means, so they do things such as reject and sabotage school systems, handing homework late, maybe there's a bit of graffiti, fighting, things like that. This reinforces self-fulfilling prophecy, because if a student isn't achieving, even if they have low expectations, they have some expectations, but even if they're not hitting these, then it reinforces the self-fulfilling prophecy that they are going to fail. Woods believes that there's more than just two subcultures, and that there's some extra subcultures along the way, and they are, you fall into different ones. Retreatism, where you just might become like a bit of a loner and kind of give up a bit. Ritualism, basically, it means that you just you go along with school values. You don't necessarily agree with them, but hey ho, what's the point? Rebellion is obviously the ones that we're talking about with the anti-school, which is definitely going against what's expected of you. And ingratiation, which is kind of being like the teacher's pet. So if you do look at these, you can see that they're kind of going from the pro school through to the anti-school. So we might talk about these two, being more of the middle class. And I think Lacey would definitely believe that these are more to do with middle class. The good thing about it is that John Furlong believes that these aren't necessarily permanent, and pupils are able to kind of move between these different types of responses. Not, and quite dramatically sometimes, you can make a decision, I'm not going to put up, I don't want to be a rebel anymore, and you can move on, and you can maybe push towards being in one of the others. Or maybe even the rebellion doesn't work, and you think, well, what's the point? I might as well give up. I've just got grief all the time. So you can actually move between these different subcultures. Stephen Ball found in the 1980s a comprehensive school which was eradicating the streaming and moving towards like a mixed ability group way of teaching. And they found that subcultures were almost, or especially anti-school subcultures, declined and almost all disappeared. However, they found that the teachers continue to label working class and middle class students. So even without the streaming, it was just within the same class. Self-fulfilling prophecies were still evident. These were based on results, so middle class were gaining a lot better in terms of their scores and their results. So even without streaming, it doesn't necessarily have a positive thing. Valuation of labelling is that some say it's very deterministic. Some people say that there's no choice but to fulfill self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, that's not necessarily the case, and Mary Fuller believes that this is definitely the case, and it ignores wider structural society problems as well, such as Marx